we are going to try the Discovery Tour of Assassin's Creed Origins. Explore this virtual museum mode with guided tours and historical locations set in a combat and quest-free environment. Let's get started. Let's check the map. We are on the outskirts of Memphis. So the whole map of Assassin's Creed Origins encompasses pretty much the entirety of the Nile Delta. So we have Lower Egypt. No Upper Egypt. If we would go further on down where the map ends, south to the Sudan, we would reach Upper Egypt. So Memphis is the historical capital of the indigenous dynasties of Egypt.
Welcome to the city of Memphis. Throughout all ancient Egyptian periods, cities had one thing in common. They were situated along the Nile's shores. Cities were often designated for government or for worship. Major cities had several temples dedicated to numerous gods and goddesses. Egyptians referred to the organization of their cities as a sepat, or later on by the Persian term nome. There were 20 sepat in Lower Egypt and 22 in Upper Egypt. The capital city of ancient Egypt changed many times over the periods.
Now, keep in mind that this game is set, I believe, 49 BCE. So, during the time of Cleopatra, during the time of Julius Caesar, and during the time of the last Ptolemaic kings.
One of the largest was Memphis, located in Lower Egypt. It was a key center for religious temples, including their most important deity, Ptah, god of creation. Thebes, located in Upper Egypt, competed with Memphis and featured as both a political and a religious center. Two important temples, Luxor and Karnak, were built there. A minor capital of the Sayyid dynasty was the city of Sais. This was the last native Egyptian capital of Egypt.
Whoa.
During the Third Dynasty, under Pharaoh Djoser, Memphis became the first religious and administrative capital of Egypt. Even when the political capital of Egypt decentralized itself, pharaohs were crowned in this sacred city in order to legitimize their ascension to the throne, up to and including Alexander the Great. Though little remains today save ruins south of Cairo, we can guess at the structure of the city, which stretched up to 5 kilometers in length and 2 kilometers in width.
Whoa, whoa.
Memphis was also referred to as the City with the 100 Doors, or the White Walls. These names were in reference to the wall which surrounded the city. Under the protection of Ptah, god of craftsmen, the city was a thriving religious and economic hub.
Whoa.
Welcome to Artisans of Ancient Egypt. It was under the watchful eye of Ptah of Memphis, the god of craft and architecture, that ancient Egyptians developed the unique rendition of the world they lived in. However, it is vital to understand that their view of art, and those who created it, was likely very dissimilar to the modern concept of the word. Instead of artists, the creative culture had skilled and respected artisans. The most significant categories of specialties for crafters were drawing, painting, sculpture, and metalworking. Ancient Egyptian craftspeople created both art and a wide variety of mundane, everyday tools. Every item created had a specific purpose and was produced by anonymous artisans who worked alone or with a team. Most crafts, such as pottery and metalworking, were utilized for everyday items. Luxury goods and artwork illustrations served temple rituals and were not meant for public display. Artisans rarely signed their names to the work, though they were clearly aware that they possessed a unique skill and talent for the task. Art, in all its forms, has offered not only a practical insight into the way ancient Egyptians lived, but in how they viewed the world and their place in it. The balance of order and chaos was crucial in both the physical and the metaphysical universes. As a result, their art appears to follow a strict set of stylistic conventions that supported this worldview. From households and palaces to temples and tombs, pottery, papyrus, and textile items were essential to the everyday life of ancient Egyptians. In ancient Egyptian culture, drawing was used as illustration, such as seen in the Book of the Dead. It was also the first step in the creation of a relief, painting, or statue. Two-dimensional representations were concerned with order and form, and were intended to honor gods and promote the transition of the soul to the afterlife.
Whoa!
Seems to be both the way. Just too deep for a horse, apparently. Oh yeah, that water is too deep.
Stylistically, Egyptians were concerned with the depiction of the human form's inner self. As such, artistic representations were not concerned with realism, but rather with idealized youth and perfectly harmonious visuals.
Queen Nefertiti. Be honest. Horse of the night.
An exception to this were scenes depicting hunting and battle, where the environment and enemies moved in lively, even chaotic ways. Animals and foes were depicted piled up, as if describing chaos, with Egyptians standing in solemn, disciplined poses, bringing order to the scene.
Now notice these guys are equipped more in Greco-Roman fashion because we are in, you know, the Ptolemaic dynasty. This
Reliefs could be either in high relief or low relief. Either method required a surface suited to the desired technique. Preparation of the surfaces differed depending on the quality of the rock. A quarried block only needed a simple smoothing. Rough-cut rock monuments, such as those found in tombs, required more work. Often the surface was coated in plaster before being sculpted.
See, look at the amazing amount of color. Now, I think this is something a lot of people fail to realize, that, you know, you see archaeological samples, you see archaeological digs, and you think, you know, the world back
For
then was
reliefs,
just bland.
preliminary
It wasn't.
sketches were
It was
drawn in red,
beautifully
then
sculpted
framed
and
with a red
colored.
grid to position the elements of the scenes. Corrected sketches were in black, and once approved, the scene was ready to be carved. This method likely explains the name given to relief makers, the one who draws the outlines. Statues were believed to be vessels for the souls of the deceased, or deities. That is why a sculptor was called the one who makes it live. This divine duty earned them the utmost respect. As with a relief, creation of a sculpture began with a drawing. Most statues were made of quarried blocks of stone, primarily limestone, though sometimes harder stones such as quartzite were also used. In ancient Egypt, the profession of crafter was organized and relied on a specific hierarchy. Most artisans depended on an institution to provide them with raw materials. There were 3 working levels for craftsmanship: domestic, large estates, and within palace and temple workshops. Some royal workshops, at their largest, covered an area of about 2.8 square kilometers in size. At the domestic level, most Egyptians were craftspeople to a greater or lesser extent. The ability to repair tools was a daily necessity. Crafted everyday items could also be bartered for at the local market. Artisans with skills but lacking in resources worked at large estates, where the elite provided them with space to work and raw materials. The most skilled artisans were employed in royal or temple projects and benefited from a special status. They were provided with good workspaces and considered to be highly skilled. An ancient text known as the Satires of Trades has a number of descriptive summaries that offer teasing glimpses into how artisans were perceived. A coppersmith was said to stink and have fingers that resembled crocodile droppings, while potters were said to be like those who lived in bogs. This view was likely exaggerated in order to highlight the most enviable position of all, that of the scribe.
This is obviously a scribe wrote this document.
Located near the Valley of the Kings, Deir el-Medina was a settlement created by order of the king to honor the most skilled artisans. Its name translates as the Monastery of the City. Allocated a house on the initiative of the king, these craftsfolk were regarded with respect and referred to as the royal artisans. Those who lived there worked on the tombs in the Valley of the Kings and its surrounding temples. Archaeologists believe the site was home to skilled and respected artisans for over 400 years. It is considered one of the most important discoveries relating to Egyptian daily life. While much of the focus of Egyptian archaeology was on its kings and queens, it wasn't until the excavation of Deir el-Medina that Egyptologists were given a valuable window into the community life of ancient Egyptian artisans.
Alright, tour completed. So, let's look at our other options for tours. We have Mummies of Ancient Egypt. Some of the ones we've already completed. The City of Memphis. Distance of Ancient Egypt. Temples and Priests. Let's zoom out. How about we go to Giza? Oh, Great Pyramids of Giza.
There is so much to discover.
Pyramids still have their limestone casings, and they still have the gold tips.
Welcome to the origin of the pyramid. The origin of the word pyramid is controversial. Most believe that it originates with the Greek word pyramis, which referred to a bread of conical shape. Life and death in ancient Egypt were modeled on the cycle of the sun. The perfect shape of the smooth-faced pyramid became associated with the metaphor of the pharaoh transformed into one of the sun's rays in death. Pyramids represented the Benben, the primordial mound of the Heliopolitan creation myth. These stories permeated every aspect of Egyptian life to a greater or lesser extent. During the pre-dynastic period, the development of funerary practices was different, depending on whether one was located in Lower Egypt or Upper Egypt. Well before the pyramid, there was the burial pits. It is on the site of Merimde Beni Salameh in Lower Egypt that we find the oldest funerary site, dating back to 5000 BCE. Study of the tombs revealed that the bodies of the deceased were deposited in a shallow grave, in a fetal position. Though a few objects were recovered from these graves, they offered no insight as to the social class of those interred within. In Upper Egypt, pre-dynastic practices are easier to study, but reveal more complex funerary rites. They are divided into two cultural phases, Badarian and Nagada. The Badarian phase ranged from 4400 BCE to 3800 BCE. Small necropolises were discovered on the outskirts of villages, revealing the emergence of a funerary cult. The bodies of the deceased were lowered into an oval grave and covered with goat or gazelle skins. Items needed in everyday life were added alongside the body. During the three Nagada periods ranging from 4000 BCE to 3510 BCE, funerary practices evolved in complexity. The shape of tombs changed from oval to rectangular, mimicking the homes of the living. The size of the burials increased and funerary items became more stylized and numerous. Tombs gained complexity, with masonry, wooden veneers, or raw bricks added to strengthen the structures. In time, socially stratified necropolises emerged. For example, in Hierakonpolis, the elite and commoners had separate necropolises. The term mastaba, meaning massive bench in dialectal Arabic, refers to a form of funerary architecture that was present in Egypt from the Archaic period to the Middle Kingdom. An evolution of the burial pit, mastabas were generally composed of two parts. A structure was built above the ground in the form of a massive rectangle with stepped walls, and a subterranean burial chamber was located underneath. Smaller mastabas often surrounded the much larger tomb of the king. These generally held the remains of the king's relatives and courtiers. The arrangement of the substructure of the mastaba evolved during the course of the Old Kingdom. From the 5th dynasty onwards, mastabas often featured multi-roomed substructures, with sometimes up to 30 rooms. Also, the quantity and quality of decorated surfaces increased noticeably, as well as the number of statues found within. The 6th dynasty would see art used to its utmost. The entire surface of a mastaba would be covered in scenes of daily life. illustrating the prosperity of those lucky enough to comfortably spend eternity near the pyramid of a pharaoh. The best example of this type of mastaba is the tomb of Mereruka in Saqqara.
Perhaps we should climb a pyramid. Let's get our bearings. That's Thebes. So that's slightly southeast. This is the Nile River, which goes north to Alexandria. So if you see that tower in the distance over there, that's Alexandria in the Mediterranean. To our west is the mountains. To the southwest we have the White Desert, the sand seas. We're looking west right now. So we have mountains to the west. Look this way, we'll be looking south. This goes all the way to the Sahara. Let's see if we can get down.
Whoa.
Alright, so we've looked at the pyramids of Giza. Where else should we go? How about Alexandria?
Welcome to Alexandria, planning of the city. Alexander's plan to build his great city began with a verse from Homer's Odyssey. There is, in front of Egypt, in the sea with many swells, an island called Pharos. Guided by these clues, Alexander the Great founded his future city at the western end of the Nile Delta.
Of course, the famous mosaic of Alexander.
Though Alexander considered this location ideal for his great city, it presented considerable challenges. Too difficult to access during storms, the surrounding swamps threatened disease, and the limestone soil prevented the growth of healthy crops. However, due to the influence of his mentor Aristotle, Alexander the Great recognized that the true value was its strategic emplacement. Alexander knew that in controlling Pelusium to the east, Memphis to the south, and his crowning glory Alexandria to the west, he would create a triangular stronghold, allowing him to control the entire delta while giving him access to the Mediterranean. The Great Walls of Alexandria had a humble beginning. Lacking chalk to outline the future city's foundations, architects were forced to use flour instead. Clouds of migrating birds swept down and ate the flour, erasing the plans. This prompted Alexander to seek guidance from the oracles, who reassured him that his future city was destined to feed a large population. Excavations led by Mahmud Bey el-Falaki in the 19th century revealed that the wall enclosure measured approximately 5.2 kilometers in length and 2.2 kilometers in width. It was roughly 9 meters in height.
So, for those of you that don't know how tall about 9 meters high is, let's actually climb it. It's about 9 meters in height. It's a big wall.
These formidable ancient walls would resist a number of attacks, including fending off the king of Syria in 169 BCE. It wasn't until 295 CE that they eventually fell to Roman Emperor Diocletian, and this only after 8 months of relentless assault.
Let's hijack war, shall we?
Alexandria's principal architect, Dinocrates, chose a Hippodamian grid plan. The grid maximized functionality, with wide, straight roads and canals running beneath them. Alexander recognized the military value of the city's design. The wide, parallel streets gave him optimal surveillance of the city, while allowing the unobstructed flow of troops.
And on that hill is the Polis. Definitely.
Whoa!
Music.
Ehi! Stopine! Poseidon! Ha!
A central corridor ran from the Mediterranean's north port down to Lake Mareotis to the south. This thoroughfare acted as an unobstructed link for commercial trade and travel between the two ports. Many of the streets were bordered with grand buildings and parks, including Canopic Street, with its impressive gate bordering the eastern end.
Whoa!
Alexandria was most likely built upon an already existing Egyptian village. Upon its completion, the Egyptians reviled the city, refusing to call it by its founder's name. Instead, they called it Raked, the building, as a mark of disdain, which was later Hellenized into Rakotis. Despite this, the name Alexandria would remain.
And if you look like down on the lower banks of the river, you see like older Egyptian style buildings. Up on the Polis, you see, you know, more Hellenistic architecture. Obviously around the major avenues, highly Hellenic architecture.
Whoa!
Let's see what other tours we have in Alexandria, because Alexandria is one of my favorite. Now, did they have the... Okay, they have the lighthouse. The lighthouse is here. Do they have the library at Alexandria? Ah! Great Library of Alexandria there is. You won't even fast travel. We'll ride there.
Whoa!
Welcome to the Great Library of Alexandria. Near the district of royal palaces and within the Mouseion was the most famous library of all antiquity. The Library of Alexandria was built to house all of human knowledge. At its pinnacle, the library was believed to contain over 700,000 parchments. Throughout the centuries, fires and wars between Christianity and paganism destroyed the library, leaving nothing behind. The loss of the building, and more importantly, its vast collection, is immeasurable. As no descriptions are available, the team's rendition of the Library of Alexandria was inspired by the visuals of the Library of Chalcis at Ephesus.
So, in other words, we're not sure what the library actually looked like, but we're basing this off of other libraries during the Hellenistic period. I mean, we knew it was grand. I mean, all the accounts, all the primary sources say it was amazing. But we don't have, you know, I mean, the library burned to the ground, which is a shame. I mean,
Αμάξα ελάβνης κακίστεως, αμέλισσον. Πολυλέτε αγγυλέσμα ως εφέλο.
let's see what the artist rendition made this outfit be.
Ουδείς πιστέψεστε για αυτή
So we have
Ουδείς εώρακε τι αυτή ανεσχυντέα.
We have scribes,
Μήνυσε.
probably copying documents. With shelves of parchment, papyrus.
Χάριν οφείλω της Θεής ότι έσωσαν με. Κράτηστε.
Πάψαστε, χάριν πάρα αυτά.
Θεοί τα...
While much of the collection was purchased at the government's expense, the library also obtained books through other means. Any books owned by travelers coming through the city were seized to be copied for the library. The copy would then be returned to the owner, and the original entered into the library's collection.
Πράγμας ανασέρασε μάρτυρας ημί. Μου εμύθισε όλο το μοιράκιον ό της Χαλιπίας αισθανωμένης υπό μου. Τιμωρήσει χρήδια τα πράγμαση. Μου φέρει να μνημονήν.
That's as I always say, reading and writing is a pleasure, not a chore.
Της χρήμας υφέρει.
Alexandria offered unrivaled intellectual and cultural attractions. Eminent scholars from Athens, Rhodes, and other Greek centers traveled to the city to learn and engage with other free thinkers. Both the Mouseion and the library were at the center of groundbreaking ideas and creative expression. The great minds of antiquity were usually well versed in many disciplines, which were often associated to specific schools of thought. The Peripatetics, the Stoics, and the Cynics were among the most well-known schools of the time. It is clear that Alexandria lived up to its fundamental role as a city for intellectuals, nurturing many great minds whose impact reverberates through our modern world.
Πατάχθη δεινός. Ιου, τέτοιες και πράξεις. Οργή
Βάσου πάση απολέσον επέχνην πεσόν. 3 ημέρα μόνο τίνη πράξονται. Τι σφάλμα δε αυτής πάλιν, τι χειρεντον μεν, τι μνης κατέχει μεν.
Ότι έβρενε φύμα άρθες. Ουκ
Ουδείς πιστέψεστε
την αυτή
Ουδείς εώρακε τι αυτή ανεσχυντέα.
Αυτό γάμουν διαδιαога
Μήνυσε.
Απολύψιν αυτόν ιερωμένη, αυτόν εκτός.
Hypatia of Alexandria was a Greek mathematician, philosopher, astronomer, and inventor. Though born in Greece, she eventually migrated to Alexandria, like many great minds of the time. It is there that she became the head of the Neoplatonist school of Alexandria. From most accounts, she was highly respected by her fellow Alexandrians, both as a teacher and a philosopher. With her death, the age of great ancient scientific discoveries came to an end. Callimachus was born in Cyrene and educated in Athens. After his studies, he moved to Alexandria to work in the Great Library. A poet and a critic, he strongly rejected the epic format of Homeric poems and instead fervently supported a shorter, more judiciously formulated style of poetry. His epigrams and elegiac poems were emulated by later poets. His work was extremely popular, second only to Homer's own works.
Έχει πίστη, ο φίλε. Είδε το πλήρω. Ο βίος σου θέλει βελτιωθεί.
It was in Alexandria that mathematician Euclid, the father of geometry, wrote the Elements, laying out the foundational work of what would become modern algebra and number theory. Euclidean geometry would become one of the most influential systems in the evolution of mathematics.
Δάνειον δυσβάσταχτον παρευριστένους έλαβον.
Έχω δει πλέον λύση να αναβρικένε.
Ο Ικέτα, άγε, φέρε τον ημών χιτώνα και τα υποδήματα, ή να ενδυθώ, τε και υποδυθώ. Χρήμε φυγήν πάρα αυτά από της οικίας, προς συνάντηση μετά του άρχοντος. Οι εργάτε άξι τους μισθού, όν λαμβάνωση εσύ.
Αχ, μωρέων πάντων λεγόμενα, εγώ της πταίω.
Πού έστειλε η σφαγή σου? Θέλω σημειώσω την τέλη των αποστολής.
So it looks like they have like stretched parchment.
Αχ, μωρή.
Άγε, ταμεία, προς την τράπεζα. Εξοφληθήτω το γραμματείον. Δάνειον δυσβάσταχτον παρευριστένους έλαβον. Μάγειρε, κάλεσαν τους δούλους διαναφέρουσι εις μαγειρεύσεις. Εις των αλετών εκτρόφων. Απόλεσαν την χείρα.
How do you calculate the circumference of the Earth? With a camel, 2 sticks, and shadows cast by the sun. This is what Eratosthenes of Cyrene described in his principal work, Geography, while he was director of the Great Library of Alexandria. He is credited for the invention of the armillary spear around 250 BCE.
Τούτες κορές μας, ποιον ουγκαστήν τούτος. Ανεσχέζονται, πάλιντε και πάλιν ιδιώτας. Αγριώνενται, καταραστένται θεοί. Αχ, αχριστιάς γαρορίων υπερβαρκιάσαν. Όχ, τα ρεπορία μεγίστην πάνω τούτο.
Της εντροπίας τε και της ανεσχυντίας. Ουδεπόποτε έικα συναισθήνε μίσον ταν μέγαν.
The earliest known and most complete armillary sphere of antiquity was the Meteoroscopion of Alexandria, with an imposing 9 rings compared to the 3 or 4 of most other astrolabes. Known as the zodiac krikatoi amongst the Greeks, the Meteoroscopion was used to determine the location of celestial bodies around the Earth. Every self-respecting astronomer of antiquity would have sought to use this tool to better understand the celestial movements.
Now, common myth is people used to think the world was flat. The ancient Greeks knew the world was round. They knew that.
Pythagoras of Samos was a well-known and respected philosopher and mathematician. He is best known for the Pythagorean theorem. However, there is proof that the theorem existed in Babylonia and India long before Pythagoras was born, casting some doubts as to who exactly originated the theorem.
Φέρε τον ημών χιτώνα και τα υποδήματα, ή να ενδυθώ, τε και υποδυθώ. Χρήμε φυγήν πάρα αυτά από της οικίας.
Alright, so we've seen we've seen some of Alexandria. How about we go more Roman period? Because remember, this is the time period where Romans are getting involved in Egyptian life. A few decades later, and Egypt will be the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. So we have our typical Roman fortress, palisade, guard towers.
Welcome to Roman military equipment. The strength of Rome was directly dependent on its military supremacy and fundamentally militaristic society. Regular citizens, comprised mostly of farmers and herders, joined to protect their land and families. In return for their service, members of this civic army were allowed to vote. Trained to be highly disciplined and obedient to superior officers, citizen soldiers developed a deep sense of loyalty to their city. The quality of the armor of a Roman foot soldier was intrinsically linked to his social status and wealth. Chainmail was the most commonly used type of armor. Scale armor, made famous in today's media, came into use after Caesar's time. Foot soldiers carried large and oblong shields, while the cavalry used smaller ones of Greek origin. Soldiers were expected to carry their own kit, including the tools required for the construction of forts and tents.
Now one discrepancy. I'm not aware of Roman soldiers carrying a bardiche-style axe. Other than that, the depiction of the centurion is pretty good. But that's probably a gameism. You have to have different enemy types.
Roman soldiers used the same types of weapons. The stomach and face were the most targeted parts of the body. As such, a legionary was equipped with two close combat weapons, a dagger and a short sword, known as a gladius. One of the most ingenious Roman weapons was the javelin. Its pyramid-shaped tip pierced the body, while its iron shank was designed to break upon impact, stopping the enemy from throwing it back.
Grain transport. Oxen. Interesting. Another palisade. Two more watchtowers. Layers and defense. Defense and depth. Great military strategy.
During their conquests, the Romans regularly transformed enemy technologies to add to their own formidable arsenal. After capturing a Carthaginian vessel, the Romans adopted its better features and constructed a superior fleet of ships. Adapting heavy artillery designs from Greek models aided the Romans in building catapults and ballistae. The latter became an iconic symbol of Roman warfare. During their conquests, the Romans regularly transformed enemy technologies to add to their own formidable arsenal. After capturing...
Let's see. Oh, we also have the forts of Cyrenaica. No, also has aqueducts. So this is the main fort. We already scouted out the outlying camps. So to the south, we went in that way. We went through the military camps. This is the actual fortress, though.
Welcome to the forts of Cyrenaica.
And I'm not sure if you noticed. What I'll do is I will climb up this wall. See if we can get a vantage point. I want to go in the building. But can't really see it from this vantage. There's an aqueduct that actually is running from the northwest. It's actually coming from like this lake up here. And there's an aqueduct that's running down to this area. And they're building it right now. But I would have to like, I mean, I could do it. You know what? Let's do it. Let's check it out. We'll come back. These are mini ballistae or Scorpio. See that? That's an aqueduct being built. So what they're trying to do is the Romans are trying to get basically fresh water from these lakes up here, and they're built like it's uphill. Like you can tell from the topography, this is uphill. This is a major military encampment. They need fresh water. So what the Romans will do is they'll funnel this water from these freshwater locations. They'll use gravity to carry it down here. So that's what they're building over there in the distance. I can actually go in the photo mode. You see, this is exactly what they're building. They're building an aqueduct to get the water down. noticed Romans used concrete. They invented concrete. They also used terracotta tiles out of clay.
Cyrenaica was a Libyan region under Roman control, gifted to Rome by one of Cleopatra's ancestors. The remains and foundations of ancient fortifications were discovered in the 19th century in the southwest of Cyrenaica, as well as a Roman garrison dating back to the 1st century CE.
So remember,
Evidence shows that these
CE.
forts were of Libyan origin, rebuilt and modified by Roman engineers when Cyrenaica was part of the empire.
And this does look new, so it does make sense. This was definitely built around the time of Caesar. Julius, that is, not Augustus.
Stone was the most commonly used material to build forts in Egypt and Cyrenaica. Though no real proof of a fortress similar to the one before you has been uncovered in that region, the team chose to add it as a worthy and awe-inspiring end-of-game challenge for the player.
You see, I really like when a game admits that it's, you know, it's actually breaking historical reality just for, you know, game content. That's really refreshing to know. So he's equipped with a spear. He has chainmail, which is customary of a legionary at the time. I don't know why he has both. He's not an archer. It's like a lot of them have bows, and they shouldn't have bows on their back. Ugh. I mean, archer is a designated position in an ancient and a medieval army. This is a historical discrepancy right here.
The forts of Cyrenaica were intended to prevent invaders from gaining access to the main route that led to the country's 5 most important cities. These forts were built close to coastal plains and deserts for added defense. 3 of these cities were recreated by the team: Balagrae, Apollonia, and Cyrene. Had it existed, the fort before you would have protected the road leading to Balagrae. Other than reference to an attack around 404 CE and a military reorganization by Emperor Justinian during the 6th century CE, we still know little of the Roman military presence in Cyrenaica.
I mean, if you look at the map, you can really tell the strategic positioning of this area. I mean, you have fresh water up in the mountains of western Egypt. This is very important to provide fresh water to military garrisons in the area, especially if you're worried, you can't see this on this map, but if you're worried about nomadic incursions from the west, this is very strategic. And also you have choke points. And with these roads that are built, you can funnel your enemy in. These are choke points. I mean, the desert's less able to stabilize, but you're not really expecting large military force go through those areas. You're expecting them to ride the coast through these mountains. Where should we go next? The Agora and thermal baths. Oh, let's do it. So, here we have a very Hellenistic city.
Welcome to the Agora and thermal baths.
This is usually a depiction of that's usually a depiction of Ares, actually. So this could be a Colosseum? Actually, I'm pretty sure that is a Colosseum, because it's shaped like a Colosseum.
Cyrene's Agora was the public marketplace and political hub of the city. Its central courtyard was open to the sky, while market stalls and shops ran along the sides, some neatly tucked away under long-roofed colonnades. As in other Greek cities, the Agora included a central hearth, known as a Prytaneum. This place served as Cyrene's official embassy, where guests
Sorry, but this is gorgeous. I had to take a picture of this.
were welcomed to the city.
That is definitely a Colosseum over there. Definitely.
An unnamed statue representing naval victories was the centerpiece of the Agora. The
Neptune's
statue's
trident.
female figure likely represents Nike, the goddess of victory. It was likely very similar to the victory of Samothrace, which currently resides in the Louvre Museum and served as a reference for the team.
Let's climb it. Get a closer look. Yeah, we've got laurel leaves, which is Greco-Roman for victory. If you notice the trident, the trident is a naval symbol in Greek and Roman iconography.
The Cyrene Agora also displayed many temples and monuments celebrating its founding king, Batos, and the city gods. There were 2 altars associated with the Temple of Apollo and a marble statue base dedicated to the goddess Libya.
Hey, ακούει με καλώς δυνάστε.
Οφθάλμενον καλυφθήν εμένη εις 2, 3, βλέπετε.
The civic buildings included a law court complete with an archive library that would have housed legal documents and other papers essential to the city's governance. Traces of fire damage to the building's remains indicate that it was possibly destroyed during the rebellion of the Jewish community in 115 CE. Public baths were common in Roman and Greek cities, and Cyrene held true to this tradition. 2 thermal baths from different eras were discovered among the ruins. An inscription at the entrance of one of the baths is presumed to be attributed to the owner. It dates the building to the Hellenistic period. Mosaics were originally created for practical reasons, the need to waterproof floors. Imported by Greeks in Egypt and Cyrenaica, the designs represented either scenes from daily life, marine fauna, or mythological figures. In addition to traditional Greek motifs, they also integrated concepts specific to Egyptian culture, such as the Nelumbo. The best examples of mosaics recovered to date, however, come from Alexandria.
Notice how we have the columns, the arches. We have a big open hall here. It's all stone, so we need arches. We need columns for support of all the weight, of all the stone in the ceiling. Beautiful.
The Cyrene baths were fitted into an underground tomb dated somewhere between the 8th and 6th century BCE. Bath seats were carved directly in the rock, allowing for more comfortable ablutions. As with many of the public buildings, the thermal baths were elaborately decorated. Statues such as Aphrodite and Eros the Archer were discovered within. The Frigidarium, a pool of cold water, was the first room visitors entered. It was followed by the Tepidarium, or tepid water area, and then the hot water room called the Caldarium. Water for the thermal baths was sourced from a natural spring. Burning stones were deposited into the water to create steam as required. The flowing water of the spring ended in a cistern and fountain referred to as the Aqua Augusta.
So, guests would come in, and they would take off their clothes, and they would basically, you know, cool off. Hot summer day in Egypt, you know, you're maybe meeting 100-degree temperatures. You come in, you cool off, refreshes you, you come out. Then you go this way.
Later Roman baths were built under Emperor Trajan and then restored under Hadrian. After the earthquake of 365 CE, they were replaced by baths of Byzantine design, with stones from the old thermal baths used in the reconstruction. The team relied on documentation describing the baths built under Trajan in order to create the location available in the game.
So that's like the warmer bath. Now notice you see steam coming from this water. You would enter this. This is where you like chill for a while in like hot water. Then you have the upstairs area.
Yeah.
Of course we have a Roman guard. Baths. So 3 baths. Cold water. Okay. Warm water. And then you have your hot water. Notice how it's not very deep either. It's not like It's not like a swimming pool. You don't like swim in this. Now, granted, in real life, a lot of these people would be naked. Because in ancient Rome and Egyptian and Greek society, you know, nudity wasn't really as big of a deal as it is now. That's why a lot of the statues are actually in nude. So. Where else should we go? The Gladiator Arena. I was absolutely correct. That is the Colosseum that we saw earlier. Because I recognized the Greek depiction of Ares, who's the god of war and passion also.
Χαίρε!
Πού καλώς
Yep, definitely Colosseum.
Welcome to the Gladiator Arena. While gladiators would not perform in Cyrene until later in the Roman era, the team decided to include a gladiatorial arena for two reasons. First, they believed it was important to portray this aspect of Roman life. And second, they felt it would add interesting gameplay possibilities.
Yeah, that is very true, because remember, in 49 BCE, Rome did not have supremacy of the Egyptian region. I mean, they were still under the rule of the Ptolemaic dynasty. So, I mean, there would be a Colosseum here. It basically would probably come about, I'd say, 4 decades later. So we're not far off the mark.
The first gladiators to enter the arena were prisoners of war.
Once again,
it was a spectacle of violent clashes between men and against wild beasts that lasted nearly 1,000 years.
He's got the Hellenistic helmet, the spear. This is a very, very good and common depiction of Ares. Or Mars, because the Romans adopted the same format for their god of war.
Eventually, volunteers began to enter the ring. For status and money, many of the more skilled combatants increased the quality of the entertainment. Thus, the profession of gladiator came to be. Bound by contract to the master of the gladiators, the fighters were fed, trained, and guarded in barracks.
Bravo.
So wrestling, I mean, you did have wrestling. I mean, this is where the term Greco-Roman wrestling comes in, which is still a sport today. You can't grab the guy below the waist, so you have a lot of suplexes. Notice how they're not doing any single or double legs like folk wrestling. That doesn't happen. And in reality, these guys would be probably nude. They would probably be wrestling nude. They wouldn't be in loincloths. There's a lot of athletes back then performed in the nude. And part of that was show off, you know, what the ancients believed to be the beautiful, you know, the beauty of the human body, but also just see how muscles work. I mean, you see how muscles work better when you're naked, engaging in sport.
Gladiators were separated into heavy and light armored fighters, each with their own set of specific armor and weapons. organizers often had two audience-favored factions face each other in combat.
Famous gladiatorial helmet. Now, I also want to notice, too, when you're walking around this game, you see the fashion of the people walking around. A lot of, like, Greeks preferred, like, a wide-brimmed hat. And that was because it was considered lowly to be tanned. I mean, everybody actually wanted to be pale in ancient Greek and Roman life, so you'd wear wide-brimmed hats so you wouldn't get tan.
The events were highly organized. Fights were held with a background of music and supervised by a referee. Death, either in the course of combat or by decision, was not always the only way out for the loser. Several were released due to their performance and gained great notoriety as celebrities.
Alright, let's get one last tour in, we'll call it a day. Temple of Zeus and... Zeus is interesting. Problem with this game is there are so many options we have. Roman forts. We could do that, but we already went through the forts down here. Trying to find something. You know what? I got an idea. How about agriculture? The lush lands of the Nile. Pyramids in the distance. Peasants singing while they tend the crops. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Agriculture and Seasons.
Humble homes. This seems to be... maybe barley. It's probably barley. Or rye.
While crops were cultivated in different oases around the desert, most of the arable lands were near the Nile. Two types of cereal grain were cultivated, barley and an ancient wheat known as emmer. These two key ingredients contributed in establishing bread and beer as the staple of the Egyptian diet and the basis of its economy. The Ptolemaic era created an agricultural revolution with the introduction of advanced agricultural techniques and new grain types such as rice, durum wheat, and pearl millet. The resulting agricultural mass production greatly increased the economy of ancient Egypt. It also prompted the development of storage and transportation, allowing long-distance trade with other regions. Both bread and beer rations were part of a system of barter payment. The state used those goods to pay wages for those who worked in the quarries and at the construction sites. Beer was so important to ancient Egyptians, they had a goddess of beer brewing, Tenenet. Tenenet is seen in many paintings and sculptures with beer, and women are depicted as the primary beer makers.
Notice how they have free roaming cattle, too. Oh, this guy's probably harvesting barley with a scythe. Yep.
In order to increase agricultural production, fertile land was divided into plots and large agricultural villages were encouraged. The state and temples were the biggest landowners. Depending on the region, fertile land was managed by civil servants or rented to individuals. Ancient Egyptians relied on rudimentary tools for land cultivation. Soil was broken down with hoes, and wing plows were used to make furrows.
Ah, the marshlands. Papyrus is probably grown here.
The three seasons known as Akhet, Peret, and Shemu corresponded to a specific phase of the agricultural process and the river's natural changes. Akhet was the time of the flood, beginning with the appearance of the star Sirius in July. Peret was the time when lands were cultivated, plowed, and sown. This fell between October and November. Shemu ran from May to September and was when harvesting and taxation began. The pharaoh's duty was to uphold order against chaos and provide for his people. Priests and local governors also wanted to appear as protectors of the people. However, any variation in the Nile's seasons could cause water shortages. This had devastating consequences on wheat and barley crops. The pharaoh, administrators, and priests knew they needed to demonstrate their ability to prevent such a catastrophe from happening. And so they invented the story, which would be inscribed upon the famine stela. The story begins with the pharaoh worried for his people. The Nile hasn't flooded in years, and his people are starving. In search of the origins of the flooding, Djoser seeks out Khnum, the protector god of the region and the source of the drought. Djoser gives the god offerings and orders his priests to restore the temple of Khnum. These offerings please the god, and the floods are restored. This story was intended to highlight the importance of the deity in everyone's daily lives, while also demonstrating the crucial role that the priests and the king played in feeding and protecting the people of Egypt.
So, I mean, the reality people everywhere is you can't control everything. Ancient pharaohs tried to make the illusion that by appeasing the gods, they could control environmental factors. Alright, that tour's completed. Let's do one more. I still have some energy left in me. Step Pyramid Complex of Dozier. That might... You know what? This might be a good one, since we were just talking about Dozier. And then we could actually go inside of a pyramid, too. So, we have the famous Step Pyramid of Djoser.
Welcome to the Step Pyramid Complex of Djoser.
Now remember, even in 49 BCE, this is a very ancient structure. Even at this time period.
The Step Pyramid is at the center of an enclosed complex, comprised of temples, models of palaces, and artificial constructions, all built for the afterlife of Pharaoh Djoser. The funeral complex itself covers 15 hectares and is located on the highest point of the Saqqara Plateau. It's clear from the elaborate detail and scale of the complex that this was a technological marvel of its time. The only fragment of information regarding the design plans of the complex was discovered on a section of stone containing an architectural sketch of a vault. The Step Pyramid is the first monument built of stone. Standing at 60 meters high, it was the tallest of its time. Built 4,700 years ago, it was originally intended as a mastaba, which was a flat-roofed rectangular tomb. Its famous architect, Imhotep, may have felt this was too humble for the great Pharaoh Djoser and began to add the steps. The Step Pyramid complex is enclosed within a 1,600-meter-long wall that is 10 meters high. This large wall was made out of white limestone and oriented along the north-south axis. While there are 14 doors, only its eastern door was intended to accommodate the living. The remaining false doors were built as portals for the king's ka to pass through. Along with false doorways, the walls were designed with bastions and steeples resembling a defensive wall. The positioning of these design elements suggest that they were related to the Hebsed festival. The only real entrance into the complex is at the end of a long, narrow passageway. This enclosure has a stone canopy carved to resemble wooden logs. At the end of the passage is a large opening. Meant to resemble a doorway, it has carved doors and hinges that are permanently open and immovable. The corridor is lined with 20 pairs of columns up to 6 meters high, built by stacking stone drums. The completed facade was made to resemble reed stock bundles. Traces of red paint were found on the columns, along with black paint on the support walls. This would have had the effect of blending the walls into the shadows to give the red columns the illusion of standing on their own.
Here we have, of course, a Ptolemaic. Yep, that's a Ptolemaic soldier, not Roman.
Chambers are located on either side of the columns. and are thought to be chapels representing the provinces of Upper and Lower Egypt. According to some Egyptologists, the arrangement of the rooms may be symbolic of jurisdiction and judgment.
Let's get a horse here.
Whoa.
Guarded by a line of carved snakes, this tomb is located at the southern end of the courtyard. The burial chamber is beneath it, down a 30-meter deep shaft. The low-ceilinged chamber resembles a mastaba and is relatively intact compared to the later burial chamber. The tomb is made of pink granite, though there is evidence it was once polished limestone. Too small for a body, it is possible that the tomb was intended for the king's ka, or to hold the canopic jars containing the king's organs. A polished limestone staircase leads west from the tomb to underground apartments. The architect Imhotep chose stone as a building material in order for the complex to last. Following the completion of the initial mastaba, Imhotep devised a burial of more ambitious dimensions. He set about stacking mastabas on top of each other. Evidence shows a staircase allowing the pharaoh to enter the divine world was represented by a tiered pyramid, oblong in shape, completely enveloping the original mastaba. The pyramid itself is a solid structure. All of the chambers
I want to actually go inside.
and tunnels are beneath the structure.
Whoa. Whoa, whoa.
Welcome to Inside Djoser's Step Pyramid. The architect of the Step Pyramid, Imhotep, was a man of great importance to Pharaoh Djoser and ancient Egyptians in general. The base of a statue of Djoser, discovered in 1926, celebrates Imhotep as a carpenter, sculptor, stonemaker, and chief of the seers. Little is known of Imhotep's day-to-day life. While he is credited for writing medical texts, it is for his role of architect that he is most famously known. From the design of the pyramid to the elements within the complex itself, Imhotep set out to create something that would immortalize his king. An architectural achievement, the Step Pyramid was made from stone blocks instead of mud brick. It was the first time Egyptians built a monument of that height. Imhotep explicitly intended for the stone to reflect natural materials. The funerary complex of Djoser remained famous throughout the centuries and millennia, and its great architect, Imhotep, was deified by ancient Egyptians during the late period. In addition to the central subterranean palace built for Djoser, 11 wells were dug. Each went to a depth of 33 meters and connected with a horizontal gallery extending for about 20 meters. The first 5 galleries were intended for members of the royal family. 2 passages lead underground and branch off in 3 directions to various magazine galleries. This vast underground space accommodated sections for storage and ceremonial offerings. One of the tunnels, starting on the east side of the pyramid, contained 40,000 stone vessels, many of them belonging to the king's ancestors. The burial chamber of Djoser is located at the bottom of a 28-meter deep central shaft. According to Egyptologist Jean-Philippe Lauer, the chamber was originally made from polished blocks of limestone, while its ceiling was decorated in 5-pointed stars. At some point, however, the limestone blocks were replaced entirely by pink granite blocks, leaving behind only fragments of limestone blocks decorated with stars. At the foot of the chamber are many tunnels going in all directions. This maze of tunnels, galleries, and chambers stretches over 5 kilometers. There are a number of dead ends and false doors. They may have been intended for the afterlife, rather than to fool thieves. Unlike the Great Pyramid of Giza or Menkaure, the Pyramid of Djoser does not have any extra openings dug out by thieves. There was no need for them. Because of the easy access into the tunnels and along the corridors, thieves had little trouble clearing out the temples once inside. It is unknown when the mummy of Djoser was stolen. All that remained was a left foot, found by French Egyptologist Jean-Philippe Lauer in 1934. This architect, who devoted his whole life to meticulously exploring the complex, believed it belonged to Djoser. The Pharaoh's apartments, also known as the Blue Chambers, are decorated with blue-green tiles meant to imitate the reed matting that covered the walls and windows of his palace. The stone is carefully curved and painted to look like the rolled mats of open doorways and curtains. There are 2 long rooms running side by side along a north-south axis. The south room has false doors separated by stone panels, while the north room is a corridor which allows access to side chambers. Nearby chambers originally housed the pharaoh's treasures.
Notice the pottery, by the way. Some pottery remains.
The door frames are made of fine limestone and carved with the king's name. As in the South Tomb, reliefs are carved into the doorways. These reliefs show the king performing rituals and visiting divine sanctuaries for all eternity. Their interiors are fictive additions made by the team to add to the wonders of the tomb. It is clear from the elaborate detail and scale of the complex that this funerary monument was a technological marvel of its time.
Alright, one more. We'll do one more, and then I'm done. We could go to the pyramids of Giza. We've done the outside of the pyramids. Is there... Dashur. Can we go inside a pyramid? Bent Pyramid of Dashur. Sneferu. I think we've done enough pyramids. What do we want to do? Workers and transports. How about maritime? Something maritime. We've done Alexandria. Let's do something with the desert. Yeah, I think that would work. Siwa. Hieroglyphs. Cyrus, the first mummy. Yeah, let's go with the desert. Deserts of Egypt.
Whoa.
So, as you all probably already know, Egypt is a land of deserts. Other than the very narrow strip of the Nile and the Nile Delta, most of it is barren desert.
Yeah!
Welcome to Deserts of Egypt. Whoa! Reaching out on either side of the lush Nile are the harsh, arid Western Desert and the mountainous Eastern Desert. They cover nearly 94% of Egypt. Each of these parent deserts have their own microclimate and contain several smaller deserts with a distinctive fauna and flora. Whale fossils were discovered within the depths of the Sahara. Known as the Valley of the Whales, this location is evidence of the seas which once covered the area. The White Desert in the northeast of the Sahara owes its name to its white limestone soil, contrasting with the yellow sand. The wind has eroded the rocks of the White Desert into stone mushrooms, the most famous of which is referred to as the Finger of God.
So that big one there in the distance,
Whoa.
the east, is the Finger of God.
Yeah!
Whoa. Whoa.
Hup.
The Great Sand Sea is a large unbroken desert that reaches out through western Egypt and eastern Libya. It is home to a unique geological formation known as Libyan silica glass. The pale yellowish-green material ranges from pebble-sized fragments to glass rocks the size of rough boulders. Whoa.
Let's make sure we're going somewhat north. What? Yeah, we'll go to Siwa next.
Whoa.
Oh.
Whoa.
I keep stopping the horse because in all reality, a horse wouldn't be able to keep this pace in an actual desert.
Yeah!
Whoa. Hup.
Whoa, whoa. Whoa.
These are the seances. Now, I'm not sure what the game designers did to the scale, but I would imagine that this region would be much bigger.
Whoa!
And here we have the village of Siwa, which is where you begin the main game. So,
Whoa!
I highly recommend this game for educational purposes, especially if you want to learn about ancient Egyptian history, ancient Hellenic, ancient Roman history, and just antiquity in general. Have a great Sunday, everyone. Cold Steel out.